I want to talk a little bit about brevity here and the concept of just being succinct and to the point with something. Back in school, I was always taught when writing essays and stuff that you've got to meet a minimum word count, regardless of how good your writing was or the points you were making in the essay. If you don't meet the minimum word count, you're going to get negative marks. And what that led me to do, and everyone else, is just adding fluff to fill space. Sometimes it was you've got to meet a certain number of pages. So what everyone does is increase the font size by one, double space everything, and it doesn't really add anything to the content. It's just this arbitrary thing. And this idea is really carried over for a long time in my mind, even into my content consumption habits. One way this carried over for me was when I had an hour-long commute each way to and from work. So I had 2 hours per day where I was doing nothing else. And I'd use this time to listen to either hour-long podcasts or audiobooks to pass the time. Especially with audiobooks, using Audible, you get a credit, and that credit can be spent on any book regardless of the length. And I try and, game the system by making the most out of that one credit by finding the longest audiobook that I might be interested in and getting that. So I think at the time there were a lot of the Song of Fire and Ice, the Game of Thrones books, and they were about 40 to 50 hours each, whereas a lot of other books there were about 20 hours. So I spent my first several credits on those and listened through them. And it was a great experience. And that was fine because I had the time to spend on that. But nowadays, without the commute time, because I work remotely, I just don't have the time to, mentally check out of doing anything else and spend listening to stuff like that. So I've also lost touch with a lot of things because I don't listen to audiobooks. I don't listen to a lot of the longer form podcast creators I used to as well. And it's made me think that maybe those things weren't necessarily the best quality. For things like entertainment, sure, you want to be entertained for as long as you can for minimum value. But maybe in the time that I listened to one of those Song of Fire and Ice books, I could have listened to 3 other books that would have been just as interesting. And it's a hard thing to gauge with entertainment, but for anything that's more, non-fiction, I feel like that's a pretty good place where being succinct is just a really, really strong skill. And I think that's really proven with platforms like Twitter, with how it's gained popularity with a 140 character limit, because there's no room for fluff. You just get to the point, and that's the whole platform. Same with things like TikTok. You don't have a 3-minute long intro to a TikTok. It's a 60-second video, so you just get the content immediately. And that must be why these platforms are so successful. They cut out the fluff and they just get straight to the point. Same for this. You don't need an hour-long podcast when a 5-minute riff could be just as impactful, and you could listen to multiple of those on the way, just depending on what you're interested in. And I think another one is recipe websites are horrible for this. Is if I'm searching for a recipe, I just want to see the recipe. But most sites are this blog format where you actually got to go through paragraphs of the author's backstory and history about why they made this recipe in the first place. And usually if you look at a recipe website like that, you've got to scroll 10 times before you even see the name of an ingredient, which is pretty horrible and just turns me off from that altogether. I'd really just rather have, even in main articles, like actual non-fiction technical articles, I'd like to see headings and bullet points that answer my questions or just let me scroll to the right point, not a wall of fluff that forces me to just skim through so much unnecessary crap. So I've found a couple of creators who really nail this quite a lot. So Stefan Judas has a technical blog called, it's called Stefan Judas, I think, but it has a section on it called Today I Learned. And this is just a section of posts that are maybe 3 paragraphs long, maybe a code snippet or a link. It's just really short, really actionable, and it means that every day he posts something, I can learn something new in seconds instead of having to read through something really long. But the fact that he does that means that he can post stuff really quickly. He doesn't need to put a lot of preparation time into it. And that means that he's posting stuff really frequently, which keeps him at the top of all of my feeds because it's so easy to digest and it's so frequent coming out. And recently I've also come across some other smaller podcasts. So Caleb Porzio has a podcast called Notes on Work, which is on average about 8 minutes for the shorter ones and 20 minutes for the longer ones, which is good because I can listen to those without having to dedicate a full hour to it. But very, very recently, Matt Stenson came out with a new one called Idle Cursor. And the first episode for that is under 5 minutes. And it was interesting. And it really pointed to me that you can be really, really short and just get a lot of good content out there really quickly. And it's kind of what I want to do with this. I want to just get an opinion out there, say it quickly, and move on. You don't need to dwell on everything if you can just create something quickly. And yeah, that's it.